The ground shook beneath the ancient cemetery as the last rays of the dying sun painted the sky in shades of blood red and deep orange. The villagers of Thornwood had gathered for their annual harvest festival, laughing and dancing without a single worry in their hearts. For 300 years, they had lived in peace. For 300 years, they had believed the monster was gone forever. Deep beneath the old church, in a tomb sealed with silver chains and blessed stones, something stirred. The massive stone coffin, covered in dust and spider webs, began to crack from the inside. A single fist, pale as moonlight and thick with muscle, punched through the ancient lid. Stone fragments flew across the dark chamber as the creature inside pushed himself upward. Lord Victor Drakel rose from his eternal sleep. His body was unlike anything the old legends described. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, with shoulders as wide as a doorway. His arms were thick with muscles that seemed carved from marble. His chest was broad and powerful, stretching the remains of his ancient clothing. 3 centuries of sleeping had not weakened him. Instead, it had allowed his body to fully absorb the blood of 1,000 warriors he had consumed before his imprisonment. Victor's red eyes glowed in the darkness as he took his first breath in 300 years. The air tasted different now. There was something strange in it, something he could not recognize. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers and watching the veins pulse beneath his pale skin. He was alive. He was awake. And he was hungry. The vampire lord climbed out of the tomb and walked toward the sealed entrance. The silver chains that had been placed to keep him trapped had grown weak over the centuries. He grabbed them with both hands and pulled. His muscles bulged and stretched as he tore the chains apart like they were made of paper. The blessed stones crumbled to dust at his touch. Whatever holy power they once held had faded long ago. Victor stepped out into the cool evening air and looked up at the stars. So much had changed. He could sense it in the wind, in the sounds that reached his sensitive ears, in the strange smells that filled his nostrils. The world had moved forward while he slept, and now he needed to understand what had become of it. The village of Thornwood was only a short walk from the cemetery. Victor moved through the shadows with the silence of a predator. His massive frame should have made noise, but vampires of his age and power could move without making a single sound. He reached the edge of the village and stopped behind a large tree, watching the celebration below. The villagers were dressed in strange clothing. The buildings looked different from what he remembered. There were lights that burned without fire, sounds that came from boxes, and metal carriages that sat motionless on the roads. Victor narrowed his eyes and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. This was not the world he had left behind. A young woman walked away from the festival, heading toward the forest edge where Victor was hiding. She was carrying a basket of bread and humming a soft tune to herself. Victor watched her approach, his hunger growing stronger with every step she took. He could hear her heartbeat, smell the blood flowing through her veins. It would be so easy to take her, to feed and regain his strength. But something stopped him. The woman looked up at the sky and smiled at the stars with such innocence that Victor felt something stir in his ancient heart. He remembered a time, long before he became a monster, when he too had smiled at the night sky. He remembered being human, being kind, being loved. Those memories had been buried beneath centuries of darkness, but now they rose to the surface like ghosts from the past. The woman suddenly stopped walking. She had seen him. Her eyes went wide with fear as she looked at the massive figure standing in the shadows. Victor expected her to scream, to run, to call for help. Instead, she took a step closer and spoke in a trembling voice. She asked if he was lost. She asked if he needed help. She offered him bread from her basket. Victor was stunned. No human had ever shown him kindness. They had always attacked him with torches and weapons, with silver and holy symbols. But this young woman, despite her fear, was offering him food and compassion. He stepped out of the shadows and let her see his full form. The woman gasped when she saw his size, his pale skin, his glowing red eyes. She dropped the basket and took a step backward, but she did not run. She stood her ground and looked at him with a mixture of terror and curiosity. Victor told her that he was not there to harm her. He told her that he had been sleeping for a very long time and that he did not understand this new world. He spoke slowly, his voice deep and rough from centuries of silence. The woman introduced herself as Elena. She was the daughter of the village blacksmith, and she had always been fascinated by the old stories of the vampire lord who had once terrorized the land. She had never believed he was real, but now she was standing face to face with the monster from the legends. Elena took Victor to a small cabin at the edge of the forest. It was her secret place, she explained, where she went to read books and escape from the demands of village life. She lit candles and offered him a seat, treating him like a guest rather than a monster. Victor sat down carefully, afraid that his weight might break the wooden chair. He looked around the cabin and saw shelves filled with books, papers covered with writing, and strange devices he could not identify. Elena began to explain the changes that had happened in the world while he slept. She told him about electricity, about machines, about medicine and science. She told him about wars that had shaken the entire world, about nations that had risen and fallen, about inventions that had changed the way humans lived. Victor listened in silence, absorbing every word like a sponge soaking up water. The most surprising thing Elena told him was about vampires. In the modern world, she said, people believed vampires were nothing more than myths and stories. There were movies and books about them, but nobody actually believed they existed. The old fear had been replaced by entertainment and fantasy. Victor found this both amusing and disturbing. His kind had once ruled the night with absolute power. Humans had lived in terror of the dark, knowing that creatures like him were waiting in the shadows. Now they made jokes and costumes about vampires, treating them like harmless fiction. Elena asked him why he had woken up after so long. Victor explained that he did not know. Perhaps the stars had aligned in a certain way. Perhaps the old magic had finally worn off. Or perhaps fate had simply decided it was time for him to return. Whatever the reason, he was awake now and needed to find his place in this strange new world. The young woman looked at him with eyes full of wonder. She said that he had a choice to make. He could return to his old ways, hunting and killing and spreading fear. Or he could try something different. He could use his immortal life to protect rather than destroy, to learn rather than conquer. Victor thought about her words for a long time. He thought about all the blood he had spilled, all the lives he had taken, all the pain he had caused. He thought about the loneliness of being a monster, the emptiness of existing without purpose beyond hunger and power. For the first time in his endless existence, Victor felt something like hope. Maybe this new world, with its lights and machines and fearless humans, was offering him a chance at redemption. Maybe he could become something more than just a predator in the night. He made a decision. He would stay hidden from the village, but would watch over it from the shadows. He would protect the people of Thornwood from any danger that threatened them. He would learn about this modern age and find a way to exist within it without causing harm. Elena smiled at his choice. She promised to bring him books and food, to teach him about technology and culture, to help him adapt to a world he did not understand. In return, she asked only that he keep her village safe and never harm an innocent person. Victor agreed to her terms. He took her small hand in his massive palm and shook it gently, sealing their unusual friendship. The young woman and the ancient vampire had formed a bond that defied everything the old stories had said about his kind. As the months passed, Victor learned more and more about the modern world. He discovered the internet, smartphones, and television. He read books about history, science, and philosophy. He watched movies about vampires and laughed at how wrong they were about almost everything. Elena visited him every night, bringing supplies and news from the village. She taught him how to use modern devices and explained the customs of contemporary society. Victor, in turn, shared stories of the ancient world, of kings and queens in battles fought with swords and shields. One night, danger came to Thornwood. A group of criminals arrived from the city, armed with guns and bad intentions. They planned to rob the village and hurt anyone who stood in their way. The villagers were helpless against such threats. They had no weapons, no training, no way to defend themselves. But they had Victor. The vampire lord emerged from the shadows like a nightmare made flesh. His massive form blocked the road as the criminals approached. They laughed at first, thinking he was just a large man trying to play hero. Then they saw his eyes glow red in the darkness. Then they saw him move. Victor was faster than any human could track. He crossed the distance between them in the blink of an eye and grabbed the leader by the throat. He lifted the man off the ground with one hand, his muscles barely straining from the effort. The criminals fired their weapons, but Victor barely flinched as the bullets struck his immortal flesh. He did not kill them. He could have torn them apart with his bare hands, drained every drop of blood from their bodies. But he remembered his promise to Elena. Instead, he simply broke their weapons, shattered their bones, and left them crying in the dirt. When the police arrived the next morning, they found the criminals tied up and unconscious, with no explanation of what had happened. The villagers whispered about a guardian angel watching over them. They did not know the truth. They did not know that the ancient vampire lord they believed dead had returned to protect them from the darkness. Victor stood at the edge of the forest, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. For the first time in 300 years, he did not seek shelter from the light. He let the warm rays touch his pale skin and felt something he had forgotten existed. He felt peace. He felt purpose. He felt alive. Elena found him standing there as she walked toward his cabin with fresh bread and books. She smiled at the sight of the massive vampire bathing in the morning light. She asked if it burned him, if it hurt. Victor shook his head. He told her that the old legends were wrong about many things. Sunlight did not destroy vampires like him. It only weakened them slightly. The real reason his kind avoided the day was because they had nothing to live for in the light. They embraced the darkness because darkness was all they knew. But now Victor had something worth seeing in the daylight. He had a village to protect, a friend who believed in him, and a future that held endless possibilities. He had awakened after 3 centuries of death, expecting to find nothing but prey and fear. Instead, he had found hope and humanity. The muscular vampire lord, who was supposed to be dead forever, had returned. But he had not returned as a monster. He had returned as something far more powerful and far more terrifying to the forces of evil that lurked in the shadows. He had returned as a protector, and Thornwood would never need to fear the night again.